If you sell and you deliver, but you don't collect, you're worse off than if you don't sell at all. Wait a second, David. How does 5% uncollected turn into a 16, 17% increase?
Maui Mastermind presents the Business Coach Podcast, answering your questions and providing real actionable insights for building a better, stronger, more profitable business without sacrificing your time, life, or freedom anymore.
Welcome to another episode of The Business Coach. I'm your host, David Finkel, and I'm going to welcome you to today's episode. We're going to be talking here about how do you make sure that you actually get paid. It's a big deal. Collecting on your receivables in a business, it's the underappreciated part of a business. In my neighborhood, every Friday, I've got to drag the trash cans out to the front curb. And the guys come by in their truck, and there's usually one guy hanging onto the back of the truck, one guy driving. They come on, they hook the can up. It flips in there and it puts the trash all in the big truck. It compacts it down. And you know what? Every time I see those guys, I smile, I wave, I say thank you. Because there have been times when on Friday morning, I've forgotten to put those trash cans out and our trash piles up. And I think to myself, you know what? I took for granted about that. The same thing is true with collections. So many companies that we coach take for granted the receivables that they have, and collections are an issue for them. And they don't want to look at it. It's not nearly as sexy as going and making new sales or improving operational efficiencies. But there's really no more important part of your business than collecting that on what you're owed. You'd say, maybe, David, it's more important to sell. I'll tell you that if you sell and you deliver, but you don't collect, you're worse off than if you don't sell at all. Because if you don't sell, you don't have cost of goods sold. But if I sell, produce, deliver, but don't collect, I'm in a worse position because not only did I not make any money, but I spent a lot and didn't make any money. So collections matters. I'm going to do this through an example, through a story. So one of the law firms that we coached, I'm going to change the numbers to make them easy for me to do the math, but the proportions are exactly the same. She was a client of ours. She ran a law firm. They did general legal work. They did some specialty stuff like family law, and they did various types. But we'll talk about this firm. So this firm had $10 million of revenue from the firm. That was their revenue. And when we talked with her initially, we asked her, we said, how do you feel about how your collection systems are? Because in most professional services firms, one of the easiest places for me as a coach to go in and make the person an extra $100,000 or more a year is to improve how they do their collections. And no professional service firm likes to think about this, right? So she said, David, we're doing great on our collections. We collect 95% of what we're owed, we collect. I thought, okay, that's interesting. What that means is 5% of your receivables go uncollected. 5% go uncollected. What does that mean in terms of dollars? It's $500,000 go uncollected. Now let's look at what that means for her business. In their world, they were running on about a 30% operating profit margin, which means out of that $10 million of revenue, $3 million dropped to the bottom line as profit. That's taking into account that there was $500,000 of sales that they did the legal work for that never got collected on that. Let's think about that. If you've already paid for the legal work, this $500,000 would turn that $3 million into a $3.5 million profit just by collecting on all of what she was owed. That's a 16.7% increase to profitability just by collecting on that 5% that she wasn't. Wait a second, David. How does 5% uncollected turn into a 16, 17% increase? Because every dollar that here drops straight to the bottom line. That's how it basically becomes 3x more on that 30% operating profit margin part of it. That's a big deal. So let's now look at and dive into how can you improve or enhance your collection systems. So if you're lucky enough to be a business where you get paid up front before you ever deliver, then collections are probably less of an issue for you. I've got clients who get paid at the point of sale, then they use that money to deliver, produce, And that's fantastic. But most companies have some of the money they're owed. Many companies have all the money they're owed be owed after the companies had to produce and deliver their product or their service. So, how do we make sure of that happening? First of all, we have to think through from a brand new, fresh way of looking at our collections. How we've historically done it has probably been an ad hoc way of doing it. So the first step I want you to do is to say, how big is the issue for us? And here's how you do that. You're going to simply go to QuickBooks or to Sage or whatever accounting software you have. You're going to have them, your CPA, your bookkeeper, your controller, your CFO give you an aged AR report. Now, an aged AR report is a fancy report that basically says, here's all the money that you're owed by days. You have 75,000, that's less than 30 days as an outstanding receivable. You have 106,000, that's between 31 and 60 days. You have this many that's between 61 and 90 days, this many that are over 90 days. It's a simple report in your accounting software that you can look at. And what you're going to do is you're going to look at those receivables that you have. You're going to look at them as a percent of revenue. How much of your revenue is going uncollected? And so if you find that percent or more of your revenue is going uncollected, you can figure out how much that means for you. Like, think about that. All drops to your bottom line. That's a big deal. So the first one is you're going to see, number one, do we have an issue? And I would tell you that my experience has been, unless you get paid in advance for all the money you have, that for at least 60, if not 70 or 80% of businesses that we start coaching with, this is an issue that will mean an extra 100 grand or more profit, not of sale, but a profit within 6 months or less, simply by fixing their collections processes. So step number two is for you to go back and say, in writing, what's our current collection process? We do our invoicing at this date. We then send out our invoices on this date. If we haven't received it, we send a second invoice on this date. If we still haven't received it, then we send another invoice. What's the current process by which you use for collections? Laying it out as a procedure on paper. Then step three says, let's look at this fresh. Most companies, they do what's called rear end load their collection process. They send a bill within 30 days, 60-day mark, they send another bill, 90-day mark, they send another bill. Then they start doing more aggressive letters after 60, 90, 120 days of not getting paid. That's the wrong way of doing it. Instead, I want to front load my collection process. So, for example, one of the first things I would tell you, and this comes from working with lots of clients, invoice faster. So, for example, we use our law example. I tell this to many law firms. Most law firms, what they'll do is they'll send their invoicing out once per month, which means if I've done the work and we produce that contract or that filed that lawsuit or whatever it is, I might have to wait 15 to 30 days before we even invoice, before we have another 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks before we get paid. Instead, at least on a weekly basis, invoices should be sent out. Now, that doesn't mean that I send every week to my one client an invoice, the next week another invoice. It doesn't mean that. But it means I do the next round of invoices for those people. So no one's waiting 30 days after I deliver my work for them to get invoice. Speed up the invoicing part. If you have people in the field who are producing work, ask them to present a bill to the person that they did the work for, company or consumer, at the point of delivery of that service or delivery of that product or installation of that product. Hey, here we just installed your widget. Here's the bill. If you'd like, I'd be more than happy to go ahead and take a payment right now while we're both here. You can put a credit card in there, or I can do it through a Venmo, or right. I should speed up that part. So I need to invoice or ask for my money faster, front load. And in addition to that, if I have clients that are historically slow pay, I spark sooner. So I send the invoice. I follow up 2 days later with a phone call. Hey, Joanna, I just wanted to make sure you received the invoice. Did you have any questions about it? No? Wonderful. And I would ask, can you cut a check or can you make payment this week? Or matter of fact, while we're talking, I can go ahead and take payment over the phone. So you front load it, not in an aggressive fashion, but in a professional fashion. At the very least, what I would say to you is you send the invoice out, you haven't gotten paid within 2 weeks, send another invoice. But this time, put a little post-it note saying, hey, can you please take care of the bill this week? Thank you. Still haven't gotten paid a week or two after that, I would make a phone call, right? Front load the efforts. I think it's a great thing for many people to actually step up and do things sooner with those phone calls. I'll give an example. We worked with a staffing company. They were doing about 20 million a year in business. They had $4 million of receivables that they had let go for 6 to 24 months, which meant they were likely never going to get paid on four. It represented 1.5 years of their company's profit, 1.5 years that they'll never get. We corrected that. We front loaded the efforts. We made sure that their staff didn't just send an email with an invoice, but followed up with phone calls within the first week of them getting the invoice to answer questions, and mostly just to put gentle pressure to get paid, not to strong arm anybody, but to follow up so that the games people play are, oh, I didn't get the invoice, or, oh, I forgot to get it paid, or, oh, I was waiting because I had a question about the invoice. And they stretch it out another 30 days. They stretch it out another 30 days. Here's the principle with collections. The faster you get paid, the more likely you are to actually collect all of what's owed. Plus, the faster you get paid, the more likely you are to protect your cash flow because that's the lifeblood of your business. So speak up sooner with that part. Letter, email, phone call. Here's another one. Sometimes changing the person who's asking for the money. So for example, let's say you have a recalcitrant person, but you have a consulting practice. Well, generally speaking, you have admins or people who are doing the receivables collection. You might even have them, if you have a recalcitrant client, at the 45-day mark still haven't been paid. They might go back to the consultant saying, hey, can you please do a collection touch with this person? Here's the email I want you to send. Mr. Jones, really enjoyed working with you on this project. Can you please make sure that your payables department gets the invoice taken care of this week? I would really be appreciative. I would really appreciate it. Signed, Joe Consultant, right? A little touch from the person doing the work. When my attorney gives me a quick note that just says, hey, would appreciate you taking care of your bill this week, guess what? I'm going to make sure I take care of that bill because I rely on that person who does the work. I might shine on when it's a payables, probably receivables person reaching out to me, but when it's my attorney, when she reaches out to me, I'm going to take that a lot more serious. So consider that as well with the timing for that part. One more thing I'll talk about with the ideal process. Don't worry about how you've historically done it. Think about it fresh. Here's a really interesting phenomena. Most of your worst paying clients tend to be your oldest customers because they came on at a time where you trained them that it was acceptable for them to be slow paying people because you weren't really as good of a business as you are today. Today, you're much more on it with new clients. I see this happen all the time with businesses we coach. So what do we do about those old, slow-paying clients? What's compounded by many times the client that's been with you for 18 years, a real percentage less than what your other current newer clients are paying. Everyone else might be paying $500 an hour, but this client might still be at $375 an hour because you haven't had the heart to raise them. Plus, your legacy customers tend to be the most demanding of all your customers. So they're low margin, they're slow pay. You need to have a heart to heart with them. Some of those people you can't afford to work for anymore. They need to work with somebody else. Some of them you need to go back and say, look, I know historically it's been okay for you to pay 60 days, 90 days late. I can't do that anymore. Going forward, you're still at a price point that's well below what other people are paying. And you know what? I'm going to slowly increase that, but it won't be a radical increase. It'll be 5% this year and probably another 5 to 8% next year. But even still, you're at about 30-ish% discount of what new clients are paying for that. But I am going to ask and expect that you pay within 30 days of receiving that invoice. And that's important to me that if you're going to pay less, I need to make sure that you pay it sooner, that we don't have to spend all this effort, time, and attention getting payment from that part. Gloria, are you willing to commit to that on your part? I appreciate that. If Gloria is not willing to pay you fast and she's paying below rates with that part, I'd say save your capacity. Go work with somebody else and either go back to Gloria and say, you know what? I need to raise you to what other people are paying right now, which is 500 an hour. Gloria will either leave, or if she stays, at least she'll be more appreciative of the value she's getting. Why? Because she's paying more. People appreciate what they pay for. So I think that's an important one. This last thing I would want to tell you about is you need to make sure that you're looking at the numbers. That if collections are an issue, the best way to deal with it is to pay attention. The best way to force you and your staff to pay attention is to make sure that you have a clear collection scoreboard that shows what's being owed, that you don't look at it once a month, you look at it at least once a week. If it's a really bad issue, you look at it every day. Who can I call today about collecting money? Who needs an email? Who should I drop by or have one of my staff members drop by their office to ask for payment, right? If it's an issue, you do it daily. If it's something you want to be more aware of to improve, you look at it weekly. If it's something that's at a steady state and working well, bi-weekly or monthly is probably going to be okay with that part. Be careful. Should you extend credit to these people or not? There are some of your clients that really you should have gotten a big deposit up front. You shouldn't have said, I'll do the work, then you pay. Matter of fact, for some of them, you should have collected all up front. When you are willing to do the work and then bill, that model is you extending credit to your customers. Be smart. What are your policies? Who will you extend credit to? Our staffing service client I was telling you about, they work with various hospitals. I talked with them. I said, look, you're extending $100,000 or more of credit to these places. Some of these are small rural hospitals. You need to give some thought. Are they credit worthy for you to do that for? And then finally, make sure, again, I want to remind you, front load the collection efforts. Don't wait until after 90 days to start actively, aggressively asking for what's owed. Do it professionally and front load it to the first 30 to 60 days. If you do that, you'll collect more of what you're owed faster. It'll make your life better, your cash flow better. It'll make your business more successful. And here's the funny thing is, you'll actually make your clients happier too. When clients don't pay you and that receivable stretches out for a while, they start to feel uncomfortable. And the longer it goes, the more likely they are for them to leave being a client of yours. And that doesn't serve them at all. I'm assuming that you do your service or your product really well. So make sure that you follow up and front load the efforts around that. It makes a difference. We gave the example with this $10 million firm. And this $10 million firm that had 5% uncollected could increase its profitability without any extra sales, without any extra expense, by simply collecting that 500,000 or that 5% number, which increased their profit by 16.7%. Just the pure power of the math. Remember, uncollected dollars, you've already paid for the cost of producing your product or service. You've already paid for all your overhead. Every dollar that would historically have been uncollected generally drops straight to your bottom line and is proportionately more valuable than a dollar of new sales. So make sure you collect what you're owed. I wish you every success in revamping your collections processes. And thanks for bearing with me on a fairly technical subject. But look, having coached several thousand businesses, I know collection processes, collection success matters. Your company's very survival, its thriving, depend on strong and effective collection systems. I wish you the best of luck.